So, starting off with AWS Lambda, this is one of the most ubiquitous ones, and a lot of the different platforms and providers you're going to see online, like even Vercel, it's built on top of Lambdas. What Lambdas are is they're serverless functions. If you're not familiar with those, a serverless function is a function that is only spun up when it's called. So in a traditional cloud computing environment, you're going to have like a box sitting in the cloud. It's your server. And that's going to be constantly running, constantly incurring charge, all that sort of thing. So it's just basically a computer that you're renting in the cloud. Versus a serverless, you don't have that server. It's not sitting there. And what you're going to be doing is you only pay to spin it up when it's needed. So it'll spool down, it won't do anything when you have no requests, but then if a user comes to your site, it spins up, serves the request to the user, and then it dies. So this is a really great pattern because this gets rid of the whole issue of scaling. Scaling is a big issue that you run into. That's where K8s come in, that's where Docker comes in, that's where all this fancy load balancing crap goes in. You don't have to worry about any of that if you use Lambdas, and under the hood at least, you should probably be using Lambdas in 2022. It's what makes TypeScript feasible for massive web apps that scale to tens of millions of users because of Lambdas. So that's what AWS Lambda is. The problem is actually using AWS Lambda is more of a pain than you would think. It's very doable and you can absolutely do it, but especially if you're learning and you're getting into it, I wouldn't recommend starting with it because there are great solutions that do similar things on top of it. And when you are getting into it, actually working with AWS Raw, it's a really, really powerful service and it's great and it's the backbone of everything for a reason. The problem is it does everything. So you're going to go into your AWS account and you're going to get into Lambdas, and then they're going to have event gateways, they're going to have bridges, they're going to have load balancers, they're going to have all this fancy stuff that you're going to get completely overwhelmed by, and it's not going to benefit you. One of the most important things you can do is actually get it in production, and AWS is going to give you so many headaches and so many problems that it's just not worth it. I wouldn't waste your time trying to learn AWS when that's a problem that's already been solved elsewhere, and I would use one of these other solutions that I'm going to talk about here in a second. So the next sort of thing is Railway. Railway is the effective successor to Heroku. It is a fully managed cloud platform, and the deployment process is as easy as what you see on screen. So right here, I just pulled up a new project, and it is literally as simple as just going in and deciding, okay, I want to deploy something, so I'll just do a template. I'm going to deploy a template. Let's use something I'm good with, so Go Fiber app, perfect. You click on this and I will just add this new fiber, deploy it, and now within minutes this is going to be deployed and ready for me. So the AWS experience would have been going in, signing in, setting it up, creating the files, then you have to go through to actually upload them. You have to set up a custom build process, you have to zip all the files, upload them, and then there's no guarantee it's going to work. The logging is hard to set up, all these issues. Versus this guy right here, it's building, it's setting up, it should be done in a few seconds here. And once it is done, I have a fully working app that's fully managed for me. Now, I don't believe that Railway is serverless. I don't think it is under the hood. It is running all the time. So you can look here at, I'll just show my usage here. It doesn't really matter. If you look at the API for my company's backend, so our Forbes API, you can see that it's constantly running. So our CPU is always going at 0.1, 0.2%, and our RAM is always incurring here with like 30, 60 megs or whatever. So it doesn't spin up and down the way a serverless environment would, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because even though you can get better scalability out of it, if you're building your backend in a language like Go or Rust or a more complicated language than, say, TypeScript, you don't necessarily need serverless. You can build it on this. This right here is serving to hundreds of users, many concurrent, and serving very large, complicated requests with concurrency and all that stuff, and it has no problem whatsoever. My monthly bill will be like 62 cents to serve a massive backend that powers a fintech website. So this is a very reasonable and easy solution to use, and I would highly recommend this to anyone who's trying to upload a backend that's not in TypeScript. So if you want to use an Express backend, we'll get to that in a second, but if you're looking to deploy a Golang backend, a Rust backend, I don't want to talk about C# and stuff. I don't like I don't like .NET. Don't use .NET. It's weird. I mean, you can, but don't. Learn Go and Rust. They're way better. Way, way better. Anyways, going back to the main issue, use Railway. It's cool. It works. It's great. Trust me, you will love it. Super easy to use, super fast. Now, on to the next one, which is Lenode. Lenode is one of many. You've probably seen like DigitalOcean, that kind of thing. What these offer you is these offer you effectively your own little computer in the sky. So what I've got right here is I just went to create a new Lenode. So the image is a Debian 11. So what you're seeing is the sort of homepage for your Linode. So what you're seeing right here is this is the actual, this is what you're paying for. So this is the thing you have. This is going to look like, if you're familiar with it, this is a basic Linux terminal up in the cloud. And inside of this thing, you can do whatever you want, which is great if you know what you're doing. But if you don't know what you're doing, and words like Apache web server or Nginx reverse proxy and all these things confuse you and scare you, you shouldn't be using this. This isn't worth your time. You have to do a lot of very complicated things to make this really worth it. So I would highly recommend staying away from this and focusing instead on something like Railway. So if I wanted to actually get, say, a Go app running on here, I would need to get Go installed for first. So if I do like Go version, it's not on here. So I would have to install Go on here. I have to install Nginx on here. I have to do all that stuff, get that all configured and running just to get a basic Hello World Go Fiber running, versus this guy right here that we just provisioned earlier, this Devout Potato right here. If I click on this, it's working. It's out in production, and I have the code right here that it generated from a template, and it's all being run through Git. So what's really cool about this too, okay, so this right here is what Railway actually generated for me. So they generated this repository. If I want to go ahead and I want to clone this, I will do this. I will just do git clone, paste that in. And if I open this up in VS Code, I now have a fully ready to work with Go Fiber app. And obviously, if you're trying to bring your own thing, you don't need to use their template. But if you had something just like this, it would be as easy as just grabbing the Git repository at that first part and just deploying from there. So if I want to go in here, and so my message right now is hello Railway, I'd say hello YouTube, and then do this. I will add this. So I just made a basic change right here. All good. And now if I go back out here and I head back to this, it's going to build that. So this will... So what's great about this is going to do continuous integration and deployment for free for you. You're probably not going to have unit tests and all that stuff. And for basic apps to just get started and learning, you don't need that. You don't need a complicated, fully set up custom CI/CD pipeline written with giant custom YAMLs and all this crap. You don't need it. Don't waste your time on that kind of thing. Waste your time. Well, not waste your time. Don't waste your time on that kind of thing. Focus your time on actually building stuff. And what this will do is this will let you actually build stuff. And that's a common theme that you'll see between the Railway and Vercel, is what's great about these platforms is you get to actually build stuff. Instead of wasting all your time going through and seeing this obnoxious looking thing, and it's like, okay, so I gotta install Nginx, I gotta install Go, I gotta set up my IP, I gotta attach a static IP, and then if I need to redeploy something, I have to go through, and then I have to manually bring it down, or I have to set up some really complicated thing to bring it down for me, and all this garbage that you just should not mess with. So while stuff like this is really great, and you'll probably see advertisements of people talking about this, this is great and it does have a purpose, but for actually building tangible apps, particularly in the startup space or when you're learning and that kind of thing, don't waste your time. Focus on building the actual product. And that's the beauty of Fiber, and not Fiber, and that's the beauty of Railway and of Vercel. These let you focus on building and making really cool, good stuff. So what you see right here is this just got deployed. If I click it again, it'll say, hello, YouTube. Beautiful. Works great. So the last thing I want to show is Vercel. You're likely familiar with Vercel. They're the parent company of Next.js. They created the framework, they maintained the framework, and this hosting solution was built for Next. If you are hosting a Next app, there is no better place to do it than Vercel. That's where my company does it. That's where I know tons and tons of other people and other companies host their Next apps, and it works amazing. The DX is incredible. It's as simple as you just add a new project, you log in with GitHub, and you load it from there. You upload the source, and it just works. It will build everything you need. It's super easy to configure environment variables. And what's really great is, even though, yes, technically Next is a React framework and you do all that kind of thing, Next is a backend framework. If you are an Express dev or you are trying to build a backend for your SaaS, say for example, you are trying to make a simple e-commerce app for your local bakery, and you have a React front end and Express backend, that Express backend should not be hosted out on something like Railway or Lenode or AWS. You shouldn't be messing with all this stuff. Don't try and Dockerize and do all this crap. Bring it into a Next application and use that backend. Next is a backend framework. Next has all of the features of a backend framework, and it's getting more every day. It's constantly evolving and adding the stuff you need to make something really great. So what I would recommend for anyone watching this who wants to try and figure out where and how to deploy their backend is do it based on what you have. If you have a TypeScript app that's a TypeScript backend, unless it's really something that's completely like separate, like it's a special like in my case, my true backend for my company's site is our forms backend. That's separate from like user logic in the front end and all that, and that needs to be cross-platform, and that needed to be more performant, so we wrote it in Go. So that should be separate, obviously. But if it's just like reading and writing users out of a database, managing Stripe sessions and that kind of thing, you should write it in Next and build your whole thing in Next. Or potentially in Nuxt, but I don't know enough about Next to recommend it. We used Nuxt 3 briefly, had some issues with it. Could be us, could be them. I'm not sure. I'm going to revisit it in the future. But I would recommend going down the Next route and use Vercel to host. And then if you're looking for a way to actually host any other backend, so if you have a Rust backend, a Go backend, a Java backend, whatever you have, host it on Railway. Railway is currently the easiest way to do it. It has great DX. I've had great experience with them. Their devs are very active online. They seem to be doing very well. They're new. This is where I would recommend going. So yeah, basically, use stuff that's easy and works well. Don't reinvent the wheel. It's not worth it. Don't write a custom Docker file. You will regret it. I've done it. I was 17 years old in high school trying to deploy a website that would have like 100 users for a restaurant. And I wrote a custom Docker file and I uploaded it to Google App Engine, did all this complicated crap, and it sucked. It was not worth it. It was dumb. Don't make that mistake. Use these providers. They're there for you. Make something cool. Don't waste your time on deployment.